As the investigation into the fatal shooting of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson continues, authorities are zeroing in on critical pieces of evidence that they say strongly implicates the suspect, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. From surveillance footage to a forged ID, a 3D printed firearm, we are going to take a look at the key evidence that led to Mangione's arrest and explore how it ties him to this deadly shooting. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The shocking murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of UnitedHealthcare in Manhattan last Wednesday, just sent ripples through the corporate world, leading authorities on a cross-country manhunt. Thompson was gunned down outside of the Hilton Hotel in New York City, where he was approached from behind by a man who fired multiple shots at him before fleeing the scene. It was just absolutely shocking. And after a brief investigation, authorities identified the suspect as Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old Ivy League graduate from Maryland. Totally unexpected. Now, as investigators pieced together the evidence linking Mangione to the crime, or allegedly linking him to the crime, there are key details that have been emerging that paint what is a very chilling portrait of the suspect, his motives, the series of events leading up to his arrest. And what we're going to do is break down for you the key pieces of evidence that point to Mangione's alleged involvement in Thompson's death. But before we dive into the evidence, I got to catch you up to speed on the latest following Mangione's arrest. This is a rapidly developing situation. So, after he was captured in Altoona, Pennsylvania, of all places, Mangione was officially charged in New York with murder, weapons possession charges, and a forgery charge. Now, I will tell you, these are just charges. He hasn't been indicted by a grand jury yet. That will happen at a later date. Now, yesterday, he appeared in court for an extradition hearing out in Pennsylvania. The idea being, how and when will he be brought back to New York to face those charges? And by the way, he's already facing firearms charges and related charges in Pennsylvania. They're a way for him to actually be caught, held in custody. His bail has been denied. So he's facing charges in Pennsylvania, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But as he was being led into that courthouse by officers, he had some kind of outburst.
Down.
Oh my God! That's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
Now, we can't make out 100% of what he said in full, particularly at the very beginning, but he appears to have uttered, "This is completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience." Don't really know what that means, but I will say at that hearing, based on our reporter, Sierra Gillespie, apparently he also tried to say something in court but was shut down by his defense counsel. Bit of an odd take on that. Maybe we'll get to explore that at another time. But at that hearing, Mangione was denied bail, meaning he will remain in the Blair County jail, the prison, while awaiting extradition, though he has 14 days, or his attorney has 14 days, to file a formal opposition to extradition, and then a hearing could be scheduled on that. So he appears to be wanting to fight extradition back to New York. Meanwhile, prosecutors have exactly 1 month to seek a governor's warrant out of New York, which would expedite Mangione's return. It's believed that Governor Kathy Hochul is already working on this warrant and working with Manhattan District Attorney in order to get Mangione back there to face this murder charge. All right, so let's jump into what we know about this evidence. And to help me break all this down, I want to bring back on somebody here on Sidebar who I haven't seen in quite some time. Professor of Law at Temple University, Beasley School of Law, Professor Jules Epstein. Jules, it's been a minute. I know you've been very busy. You're a very, very busy special man, but thank you for taking the time to come back here on Sidebar. We always appreciate it, and good seeing you.
Good to see you and honored to be here.
So real quick, before we get into the evidence, if you have any just initial thoughts about the extradition issue, it seems like Mangione is going to be contesting it, or at least that's based on what his attorney has been suggesting. Where do you see that going, real quick?
I see that as slowing the train down but not stopping it. If I'm arrested in Pennsylvania, but I'm wanted in New York, New York's governor sends a document to the Pennsylvania governor saying, please send this person back. And unless the Pennsylvania governor says no, it goes to the courts. He has a technical right, and it's an important right, to challenge, is there proof that there was a crime in New York? Is there proof that I'm likely the person? But it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not a hard standard for the Pennsylvania prosecutor to meet. So, absent something extraordinary,
Yeah.
I imagine this fellow will be back in New York in the next month or two.
Okay, good. Good to know that. Okay, so now I want to jump into the evidence with you. This is what we really wanted to talk about. And I want to start by looking at what investigators obtained from and around the scene of the shooting. So after spending hours reviewing this surveillance footage, and there's probably a lot more that we haven't seen yet, investigators landed on their first critical piece of evidence in this case, and that was surveillance footage from outside the Hilton Hotel. And it shows this man wearing a winter jacket, beanie, a medical mask. And because of this footage, investigators were then able to link the shooter to more surveillance footage that was uncovered. So there's this footage from a Starbucks nearby where the suspected shooter visited. This was right near the hotel, still with his mask on. But then there was a rare moment inside the hostel where the suspected shooter can be seen showing his face. This was huge. This was critical. This was at the hostel that he apparently checked into a few days before Thanksgiving. And reports say that the shooter lowered his mask because he was interacting with or flirting with this hostel employee. That was critical, seeing his face there. And when the NYPD released the surveillance images to the public, it seems like this slip-up would end up being pivotal. And there was other footage too, like from a taxi cab and also from a bus depot. So Jules, I want to bring you on this. So knowing that police were able to positively identify Mangione seemingly from this surveillance, how strong do you think that evidence is?
So until a jury gets to look at it, right, look at the visual on the video and look at his face, sorry, there we go, and do the match, that's the jury's call. The closer he looks to that, the better. The grainier or fuzzier those images are, the worse. But it doesn't have to be the home run in and of itself. In other words, let's suppose the face is blurry, but it's his race, his height, his eye color. All of that is incredibly important circumstantial evidence that they can link together with other proof later. I'm still waiting to hear, DNA results from the backpack, things like that. So incredibly important. And if they can show a continual or reasonably continual chain from video 1 to video 2 to video 3, face exposed, and say, this is that person, legally, if a jury looked and it said, damn, that's him, and they have the video with him shooting, that alone can be proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's one of the questions why you wonder why a killing like this would happen in a metropolitan city where there's surveillance cameras everywhere. Now, I should tell you that there was this warrant, a felony arrest warrant from New York, where the detective who signed it states that the man who shot Thompson, in his belief, is the same man from the hostel, leaving and checking in based on the surveillance footage. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the McDonald's eyewitness identification based on that surveillance footage. But by the time police uncover this surveillance footage and send it out to the public, Mangione, he had already fled the scene, first by bike, then by taxi, then by bus that took him out of the city. That's what investigators seem to believe at this point. And there were some items that Mangione allegedly ditched along the way. So apparently this water bottle that was purchased at a Starbucks nearby, the energy bar wrapper, a burner phone or some type of phone, and a backpack full of Monopoly money that was actually found in Central Park. But what the reporting seems to suggest, Jules, is that did very little to help police, because the reporting indicates that initial DNA and fingerprint analysis didn't turn up any matches to anyone in their databases, at least with respect to the phone and the water bottle and the candy wrapper. So A, talk to us about that there were no matches to their database. But B, maybe this is the more important question, now that he is in custody, can they better compare the forensics? Because I think under Pennsylvania law, they can take a swab of him while he's in custody. Maybe match it up to these other items?
Absolutely. So the DNA is incredibly powerful. DNA is only as good as who else's DNA is around to compare it to. I'm not, I think, currently in a DNA database. So when I commit my first crime, which I will never do, right? DNA is not going to be helpful until I am caught. Once I am caught, whether you get it by a statute, by a warrant, or you just wait till I drink out of a cup and I put it down and then they grab the cup, there you have a comparison. So if they collected this stuff carefully, they didn't risk contamination by, not wearing gloves and stuff like that. They've preserved it, and then they test his DNA and it is corresponding. In other words, at the multiple loci that they are the same. It's incredibly powerful evidence.
And real quick, what would be a way defense attorneys can challenge that evidence?
So the basics of DNA science are so rock solid. It's hard to challenge that. It's sort of a meaningless challenge. Your other challenges are going to be A, contamination. B, which I hope no one would raise unless they had a good faith basis, is a plant. Someone phoned it. C is, yeah, it's mine. I was in New York that day, but I'm not the shooter.
Hey, so look, we plan to continue to cover updates from this shooter story as it develops. And for that, I have to thank our sponsor, Odoo, because with their support, we can make that happen. Now, Odoo is something that can really help your business. Like, for instance, their incredible accounting app. You know how keeping track of finances can get messy and confusing? Well, Odoo makes it super simple with their accounting app because you can manage invoices, expenses, and even get financial reports all in one place. Look how clean that interface is. It's designed to save you time, reduce headaches. You can automate those repetitive tasks, which means you'll have more time to focus on what you really love, growing your business. So if you want to take control of your finances and make your accounting life a whole lot easier, check out Odoo's accounting app at our link, odoo.com/LC-Sidebar8, and try Odoo for free today. Why, if this is a carefully planned out shooting, why discard or seemingly discard all these items like this as you're fleeing the scene? And also the monopoly money found in the backpack. There are aspects of this crime when we didn't know who committed this or allegedly committed this that we thought, was this a professional hit? And then there were other aspects of it that looked very, very weird and also amateurish. What do you think?
So I've been engaged in criminal law and criminal defense, although now primarily teaching, for 45 years, 3 months, and 5 days.
And 6 seconds, and 7 seconds, and 8 seconds.
Thereabouts. Come 9 o'clock this morning, it'll be complete. Even really smart people, and this person, if he's the one, certainly is well educated.
Yes.
Don't do things perfectly. People slip up all the time. There's a panic. Maybe the water bottle fell out of a pocket. In other words, it's just a miss. Who knows? But I've learned not to expect perfection from people who commit crimes.
I think that's fair. I think that is a very fair assessment and consistent with what we've seen. But look, the monopoly money is interesting because what do we also know? We know that maybe these items right now maybe don't tie so much back to Mangione yet, but they did pick up these bullet casings. And it's been reported that the bullet casings have the words deny, defend, and depose on them. And those words are very eerily similar to the 2010 book, Delay, Deny, Defend, Why Insurance Companies Don't Pay Claims and What You Can Do About It. I mean, we're talking about the death of a CEO of one of the largest health insurance companies in the country. And, it might point to a motive, maybe some sort of disagreement with the insurance companies. And we'll get to this manifesto in a minute. But the bullet casings themselves, how significant are they?
Well, first of all, they're significant because they are the casings at the scene. So they are the casings for the bullets that were fired at this person. It's just generally proof of caliber. It's proof of intent, multiple shots. We've got that from the location of the head. The words on it are significant because most bullets don't, or right, shells don't have words on it. So somebody was sending a message. It's not random. So that's important again to the argument that this is intentional and premeditated. And again, if that links to him and his manifesto, it's just icing on the cake. It just ties it all together again.
Let's talk about this. And by the way, yes, he's charged with second-degree murder in New York, which is the intentional killing of another human being. So with that in mind, arguably one of the most chilling pieces of information or evidence in this case is that during the arrest, police find this, what is a 3-page handwritten document that is now being called a manifesto. And it brings me back to this idea of motive, right? And we know that you don't have to prove motive, but it's really going to be helpful to tell a story here and try to understand what happened. So in this document, Mangione appeared to express what is a deep disdain for corporate America and the health insurance industry, which he described as parasites. And we've talked about it before. We've reported on snippets of what it said. This was as confirmed by law enforcement. But just yesterday, it appears that an independent journalist by the name of Ken Klippenstein released the full text. And according to TMZ and Newsweek, law enforcement sources confirmed to them that this is the real text. So here are some of the highlights in it. First, if this is true, he starts off with an indication of who else may or may not be involved in this killing. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. Now, early on in the manhunt, there were all kinds of speculation that this was possibly a hitman conspiracy or that there had to be more than one person involved in this. But if this is believed to be an actual admission of the crime, then authorities know that Mangione allegedly acted solo. And then there's even something more significant in this letter because there's the criticism of the healthcare industry, particularly United. It says, as a reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the, and it's hard to make out that word, largest company in the U.S. by market cap. The reality is these, again, can't make out the word, simply have gotten too powerful and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit. Now, this document right here kind of offers a glimpse into a very troubling worldview, but perhaps maybe Mangione was planning something extreme here. And an internal NYPD report obtained by the New York Times revealed what the department's Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau thought about the letter, because as they said, the suspect appeared to view the targeted killing of the company's highest-ranking representative as a symbolic takedown and a direct challenge to its alleged corruption and power games, asserting in his note that he is the first to face it with such brutal honesty. And the report also added that the suspect likely views himself as a hero of sorts who has finally decided to act upon injustices. So, Jules, turn it over to you now. What do you make of this? And would this be admissible in court?
So what I make of it first is just if you start with the very first sentence, I acted alone. Forget that it excludes others. It includes him, right? Yeah. I did this thing or I did something. Anything a defendant said or wrote, if it can be properly proved that they said it or they wrote it, is admissible. It's admissible as what's called a statement of a party opponent. So the government simply has to prove, if they can, that it's his handwriting, or if it's typed, he possessed it, right? So presumably, if I have a note in my wallet, I wrote it. I've got notes here on my desk reminding me to do stuff. It's my words. They have to be able to show they're his words. And if he said, I didn't write it, I picked it up. Okay, well, what are you doing walking around with this thing? First of all, no one has to believe that. But as long as they can show it came from him, it's his words, it comes in. Yeah. And it's incredibly, incredibly damning.
So yeah, that it is. And then we can't forget that after Mangione takes off, or allegedly takes off, 6 days go by before McDonald's incident happens. That there has been mixed reporting on this, but some say an employee at the restaurant overheard customers pointing out Mangione, talking that it might be the suspect, again, based on the surveillance footage that was released. Others say it was reported directly to an employee. A man spoke with reporters Tuesday saying he was one of the people joking about it, whether it could be the shooter inside of the McDonald's. And then when Mangione was asked if he had been to New York recently, when police show up there and ask him, they say his body language was a very visual tell because he seemed to be very quiet, they say, and then started to shake. And he didn't even really answer the question. Now, those initial impressions, Jules, I'll throw it to you. Again, potentially eyewitness identification based on that surveillance photo, and also the impressions of officers. I think both are significant, right?
Right. So I'm not sure if anybody cares when we get to a trial that a customer thought, oh, that's the guy. That's sort of background. The officer's take on what you call the tell is what we call lay opinion testimony. So if I'm talking to you right now and then I asked you a question and all of a sudden you looked embarrassed or upset or freaked out, I'm allowed to say at question 12, you looked embarrassed or shaken or freaked out, because normal people can draw those conclusions. Right. So unless a judge said, people can get freaked out for too many reasons, I find that ambiguous and therefore may be misleading. The body reaction, someone looked away, someone did this, is again potentially useful information. I don't think that there's any Fifth Amendment problem there, because he didn't say, I don't want to answer. He just looked freaked. And so, again, we're always looking for how people behave. There's some stereotypes. Sometimes we take how someone behaves and it actually has nothing to do with guilt.
Sure.
In this case, it certainly seems that most judges would let this in without a hesitation.
And the fact that the witnesses, or however it went down in that McDonald's, looked at that surveillance footage or those photos and matched them up shows you how important that piece of evidence is. Now, I want to get into a few more pieces of evidence before we have to sign off, because when police apprehended Mangione, they discovered this ghost gun. And this ghost gun on him was consistent with the weapon that the shooter can be seen using in that surveillance footage from outside the Hilton Hotel. And this type of weapon is very unique because it's usually sold, our understanding, is in a kit that you can build yourself. It doesn't have a serial number attached to it. It's not really traceable. How significant is that, Jules? And by the way, there was a silencer as well they found.
Every piece of evidence that looks like what's on the video is incredibly significant. What the police will be doing is getting their best ballistics experts to now test fire that gun. What they do is they take new bullets, put it in the gun, shoot them into a big jar of like Jello or water, so that nothing can mark the bullet other than the gun. Because when a bullet travels down the barrel, it picks up markings. And then they're going to look at that under a microscope and compare it to the markings on the bullet or bullets recovered at the scene or from the CEO's body. And then they're going to say different or similar/same.
Right.
The reason I say similar/same is within the ballistics community, they believe that they can say this bullet came from this gun and no other gun in the universe. Forensics, scientists, statisticians say, whoa, we don't know that. No other gun could have done that. But that debate goes on in the courtroom. The truth is, if it's the same caliber, if it's got the same general markings, whether the officer says the markings are the same, period, or the markings are the same and no other gun could have produced it, it's going to be, again, incredibly powerful evidence. The only concern the prosecutor will have is if they test fire and they have substantially or just meaningfully different markings.
Yeah, assuming it is. It's huge. It's huge because, again, they couldn't find the weapon in Central Park. They sent dive teams out there to try to find it. They couldn't find it. Now it looks like, if you assume it is what it is, it's been on him. And by the way, just the fact that he was in possession of the gun, or allegedly in possession of this weapon, is why he's facing the Pennsylvania firearm charges. That's what originally they arrested and detained him on. And he is facing those charges, but really the name of the game is the murder charge in New York. Now, that wasn't all that they found, because they also asked for his identification. And this is another piece of key evidence that came into the fray. A fake ID. And it wasn't just any fake ID. It also happened to be, according to authorities, consistent with the ID that the man on tape had used to check into the hostel in Manhattan. Now, Mangione presented this license, according to reporting, which was registered to New Jersey under the name Mark Rosario, and this helped police figure out that Mangione was, again, seemingly trying to conceal his identity. And by the way, he also had other multiple fraudulent IDs on him. So not only this New Jersey license, but others. So what do you make of that?
Well, it's got two independent uses. One is, as you said, it's a link. I have an ID that says Jules Epstein, and who checked into the hostel? Jules Epstein. So that's a nice 2 and 2 make 4. Separately, when we're trying to prove A, you're a criminal, and B, this is premeditated, having the tools to help escape, the cover-up tools, are incredibly important. A single fake ID is cover-up tool number 1. Multiple is multiple, right? It's just even more powerful evidence of planning.
Now, unfortunately, I'm running out of time with Jules, but I would have asked him also about the, maybe real quick, if you got a minute answer. When they find him, he has this backpack. He has around $8,000 cash. Prosecutors actually brought this up during his extradition hearing. They said that this shows that he was looking to evade authorities, and that bag, they say, was a Faraday bag, which I understand blocks cell signals. And Mangione himself, though, he actually in court pushed back on that, saying the money had been planted in his bag and that the bag was waterproof, but it didn't show any kind of criminal sophistication. Real quick thoughts on that before we got to sign off, Jules.
First of all, he should have kept his mouth shut. Those words can only come back and bite him. Second of all, that's for the jury to believe. But again, lots of money, if I recall, in more than one nation's currency, and a Faraday bag. It's not your typical waterproof bag, right?
Yeah.
He can give his excuse if he wants, and maybe his lawyer will find an advertisement. Buy these bags. They're really good waterproof bags for the next time you're out on a rainy hike in Pennsylvania forests. But it's more things that also can reasonably said to be signs of an attempt at concealment.
In and of itself, probably maybe nothing, but now compared with everything else, coupled with everything else we talked about, you can see how it could be problematic. I could talk to Jules Epstein for a whole other hour, but I wouldn't take his time, and he's a very important man. So Jules Epstein, thank you so much for coming on. Great seeing you.
Great seeing you, my friend.
All right, so now as this is a rapidly developing situation, after we just recorded with Jules, CNN reported that according to 2 law enforcement officials, fingerprints at the crime scene now do in fact show a positive match to Mangione. That is huge. As CNN notes, that really is the first piece of forensic evidence that links the 26-year-old to this shooting in New York. So we will keep you updated on what happens next in this case. But for right now, that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.